Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining another session of the Build Your Confidence on Stage Public Speaking Taster Class. Thank you to everyone who has who I can see joining in, and if you can kindly switch on your videos on this session as well, so that I can have a see in terms of who I'm speaking with. That would be great. And hello to everyone on Facebook and all the other channels that are tuned in as well. So in this session, I want to really highlight and look into few areas. One is the journey, the journey of somebody who goes into the world of public speaking, because a lot of us have a fear, a lot of us have some form of doubt, and a lot of us, whether you've had some experience of presenting or speaking, there are some certain issues and certain challenges which we often face. Now, if I was to tell you a quick story about how I got into public speaking, now public speaking for me didn't come naturally. Now, public speaking, there was always questions arise and some form of doubt that I always had, which involved me almost self-questioning my ability that can I or can't I do this? I'm scared of what people would think. I'm scared of what I'm going to say, how I'm going to look. Am I wearing the right clothing when I'm on stage? On all of these sort of negative questioning that often appeared was creating a sort of clouds of judgment in my own mind that really affected my ability to present on stage from an early age. And to build that level of confidence over time was about building a better relationship with those sort of forms of doubt that I had. And I wanted to sort of put across, I know a lot of people listening would actually agree here that public speaking tends to be one of the most common issues or challenges individuals face, whether in the professional setting, whether we have a sort of an event to deliver, or you're in a meeting and your boss tells you, here you have to deliver this presentation, and you're trying to get yourself prepared and ready, and all of a sudden you become anxious, you become nervous because you're ill prepared, or you're just really scared in terms of all those eyes looking at you. So how do you get yourself to that position where you feel confident, you feel almost to the point that you're not stiff, you're not uh, really hurting yourself in the sense that because you're afraid, because you're out of what other people think, that you're going to struggle when it comes to performing. And I want to share with you in this session a few things. One is about how to overcome a certain level of fear and why we have these fears initially. And I think improving that relationship you have with doubt in itself. And secondly, it's all about the delivery style, because I know from the last session, some of you had questions based around, okay, how can I deliver much more effectively when it comes to a presentation or a performance on stage? And you'll hear me use the word performance quite often. The reason being is I don't want you to see speaking on stage or being a public speaker as just being a public speaker, because it's an art. It's a form of knowing how to caress your audience, bring them in, feel that freedom to be able to sort of get them to hook into your, buy into your message. And all of that is a form of art, whether it's the way you speak, whether it's through your tone of voice, your expressions, your body language, all of these play a critical factor. And I'm sure you've probably seen, for example, if you're at a university, if you're a university student, you've probably seen your professor or the dean or even your boss at work. When they often speak, they're often quite stiff and rigid. Or if they're speaking, they speak for a very long time and they're pacing themselves up and down the stage, left, right, and center. It's because all of these go unrehearsed, all of these go unprepared, and sometimes improvisation, it's good, but it's not good at the same time, because you still need to prepare for how you're going to do things. And I learned through public speaking that fear in itself was a critical factor, and it's something that affected a lot of people because of the clouds of judgments they create. And I'm going to share with you four reasons as to why people, or personally me, had issues with fear initially. Firstly, it was around me believing or me feeling that I had a lack of experience in the subject area in which I was speaking about. Now, I talk about various things, entrepreneurship, writing, public speaking. But initially, when I got started, it was all to do with entrepreneurship and empowering others to become or how to become an entrepreneur. And I was only 3 years into my entrepreneurial experience when I started speaking on stage. And I'm sure many of you would agree with me that when you're in a room with a group of people, and some might be more senior than you, some might look more senior than you but are similar age, some are perhaps younger than you, but you have that inner feeling that actually you might not have enough experience to talk about that subject, so you're already clouding your judgment. You're creating this form of anxiety inside you that you are already not good enough to talk about it. When you have any form of experience and you want to talk about it, the first sign of overcoming fear is believing that what you're going to share is going to add value to the audience, no matter how experienced or how inexperienced you think you are, because your audience is there to listen to you. And you're only presenting to that audience because A, you've been asked to, B, you want to, and C, it's an audience that wants to hear exactly what you're going to talk about. So putting yourself in that position that I'm going to be speaking about something and I'm not an expert in it already is a form of judgment that you don't want to cloud yourself over. That creates anxiety, stress, fear on stage, and then you become very stiff. You become very nervous when you're performing, and that's one thing you really want to avoid. So whenever you're having that opportunity to speak on stage, believe that whatever it is you're sharing, because you've been asked to speak, you're able to tell a nice story around that, and you have the skills and the necessities, even from the experience you have, even if it's 6 months experience, a year's experience, whatever limitation of experience you have, that in itself tells a story. What did you learn? What did you like? What did you dislike? And really harness the ability to tell that story. And we'll come into the power of storytelling later on in this session. But believe that you are not an inexperienced to talk about your subject, no matter how old or how young the individuals are, because it comes from a unique perspective, and you have to believe that you have a unique perspective to tell. Second is the thought of being criticized. Now, when you're speaking on stage, you often have so many eyes looking at you, whether even if it's your immediate colleagues, whether it's your fellow students, you're speaking at a public event and people you don't know, their eyes are on you. And sometimes what we often feel and are nervous about is the thought that we're being criticized. And that's our own, once again, our own judgment that creates this form of fear. People love you for who you are because you're unique. You have something to say and something to share, and it's all about the expressions that you give. When you're excited about something, yes, you're going to be more paced up, you're going to be more energetic, and you're going to share in a much more sort of energetic way. But the thing is, when you often cloud your sort of imagination or your thought process, that people are judging you from the offset, from the first word you say, you're creating this internal fear even before you come on stage as well. And if you believe that you're going to be criticized, it's already giving yourself that sort of firewall in between that you cannot cross to go onto that stage. So make sure that you're able to feel a little more confident and have that little more inner belief that even if there is one person who does criticize you, there are probably 10 others who appreciate what you're doing. So it's about changing perception in terms of how you think and how you perceive the audience, because nervous individuals speaking on stage are actually more loved and appreciated, because especially if you're speaking up for the first time, because you're very vulnerable, and people love vulnerability. The power of vulnerability speaks out so much in the world of public speaking because you speak more soft, quiet. People can see that you're internally afraid and you're scared, but you still got the courage. When you twist it around, you still got the courage to go and present. So the thought of being criticized, try to eliminate that, or at least try to control that relationship you have with your own inner doubt. That actually people won't criticize you. People might actually love you for what you say, appreciate you for what you say. So it's a shift in mindset. The third thing I experienced was a status difference, where when it comes to status difference, where people who might be, as I say, more senior, people who might be more experienced than I am in the topic, if I'm going to be presenting to them and they're already more experienced, I need to question myself. I need to ask myself, is this the audience for me? And you need to ask yourself that as well, because when you're speaking on stage, you need to make sure that your audience, that you're able to add some form of value. And if there's too much of a status gap between somebody, for example, yourself, and somebody who is too much of an expert, or this entire audience is too much of an expert in the subject you're speaking about, you need to ask yourself whether this is the audience relevant for you. If you want to jump into the world of speaking or speak at your first event, the audience has to be something who you can add value to. So you need to think of the right people. You need to look into the sort of the message that you're sharing and see, is that how is that going to add value? Is this the right audience? How much of an education level do they have? What's their background? So it's the research that you do beforehand. And when you've done that inner research, that internal research, you know that yes, this is the right audience because they've only got a year's experience in business, or they've got a year's experience in writing, or whatever the topic is, and you've got 3 years. You already know that you can add something because you've got 3 years more experience to share with them. So don't be afraid about the status difference, but do the research beforehand in order to fight that level of fear that could harm you. And one thing I also explored, the fourth element, was the difference in culture. Now, I don't know as much in terms of how much that would affect in Bangladesh or in other parts of the world, but I know from being here in the UK, it's a very diverse, you come across a very diverse group of people. I grew up in a predominantly Bangladeshi or community-orientated group of people, and that's who I could speak to, and that's who I felt comfortable speaking with. But when I knew that the audience was slowly starting to fill up with people who were not Bangladeshi, people who were even to the point they were Indian, Pakistani, to the point they were even British, English, American, African, all of these individuals that were coming on board to the sessions. I felt there's a huge difference in culture, whether that was to do with because I've never spoken in front of them. That was an internal fear. But what I got to learn from that is that the difference in culture actually means that that element of fear is not as you have to look at it in a different way, where if it was people in the Bangladeshi community talking about somebody who is a Bangladeshi presenter speaking on stage, they would often be more critical because of who you are and because they know your sort of background, whereas others who don't know you as much won't be as critical because of your cultural differences. So it's about a shift in mindset in how to overcome fear. And these 4 levels of sort of self-clouded judgments are what sort of builds up this whole level of fear, that A, you think you lack experience, B, you think you're going to be criticized, C, you think you have a status difference, and D, you think that people of different cultures will not appreciate you for who you are. You know, all of these form judgments, and all of these form a sort of element of fear. And so if you're able to want to overcome fear in itself when it comes to public speaking, you need to make sure your mentality is positive. You need to make sure that you have a better understanding in terms of who you are and what it is you want to achieve, and see that whatever you want to accomplish, you have the end goal in mind. And that leads me very nicely on to the next element, because one of the questions asked from last week's taster class session is a style of delivery. Now, a style of delivery, there are many styles, to be honest with you, and to cover it in this session, all of it would not be possible. But one of the core style of delivery, which I want to teach you and I want you to take away from this, is the storyteller style. Because every one of you is unique, right? Every one of you are individuals who have a different story to tell. And these can be told in various ways. They can grasp an audience through whatever means possible. Now, when you start with the end in mind, what does that actually mean? So think of it as, for instance, if I was to give you my personal example, I go onto a stage and one of my events could be, the overarching message of my event could be that what it takes to follow your passion and dream. I want the audience to take away the idea of what it actually takes to follow your own passion and dream. So how do you build up a story that actually focuses on that overarching message of what it takes to follow your passion and dream? So I might share with them tips, guidance, steps on how to follow your passion and dream, right? Your topic and subject could be anything IT related, anything to do with any sort of subject, engineering, whatever your expertise is, and you want the audience to learn from it, and you have a story to tell. How do you find the story? That's the big question. How do you unveil a story that is worthy of sharing with an audience and they can take something away? So I want to teach you or share with you 3 very important aspects that I learned throughout my career in public speaking on how to form a story. And this story creates the foundation. There are many other elements that you could add to it, but I will share this with you, and I will give you an example. I will read out a text I created just for this session alone. So you will hear me giving a sort of an extract from certain things I wrote. So the first act in trying to create a story is creating the setting and situation. So the theme of what this story is all about. And to do that, there are four key elements, right? Four key elements. Number one is people, knowing who the people is. So the characterization process of telling a story. Number two is all about the place where it's set, the setting of the story itself. Number three is things. So things could be anything, could be from your homework to things, for example, you do on a day-to-day basis. And number four is about the time. So when it took place, when that situation occurred. So as the part of the first act, you need to be able to tell your story. You need to be able to have that characterization process that reels people in. That when you're speaking on stage, you're able to sort of give the narrative as to where this story is going, how this story is building up. And I want to share with you an extract which I wrote just an hour or so ago. And this is a fictitious story, so don't take anything away from it in terms of the storyline, but it's just give you an idea as to how I formed a story within within a 15-20 minute sort of process. And this focuses on people, place, things, and time. And this is the act one of the story, the setting and situation. So I'll read it out to you. I put it as, Sarah is my local neighbor and my childhood best friend. We grew up together playing all silly games from hide and seek to telling each other our secret stories. We made a pact together that whatever happens in life, we will all be together as best friends through thick and thin. My parents often visited Sarah's home to meet her parents. They got to see how focused Sarah was in her studies. Her walls were framed with certificates of achievement, and my parents couldn't be more prouder of Sarah. They'd look at me and say, Sarah is a great inspiration. Now, when you hear this extract, I listed people, place, things, and time. How? Let me explain. People. People involved my parents. People involved Sarah, the characterization process, and myself. So there were three sort of groups of people involved in this story. Place. Where was it taking place? So a lot of it was in Sarah's home. So my parents visited Sarah's home, saw all these certificates, right? Things. Things involved, for example, the certificates themselves. Things involved things me and Sarah did. Play hide and seek. We were childhood best friends. And time. Timing was the set that it was telling a story backhand that me and Sarah were childhood best friends. So it took us back to time in terms of how we grew up together, right? So you can see that that initial narrative sets the tone for how the story is being told. Now that's the first act. The second act that you need to produce when telling a story on stage is the conflict, the struggle, and why was it challenging. So when you're thinking about creating a story and you want to tell a story on stage as a public speaker, the second phase of the story must highlight conflict, struggle, or any challenge you face. And whenever you're addressing this to an audience, they want to know what went wrong. They want to know the aspect of your story that they personally can relate to. Because if I just told the story as the first part, that doesn't make sense. The audience take away nothing from it, right? There's no learning curve from that. And as a public speaker, as a performer, as a professional speaker, which I am, I want you to be able to tell a story where the audience has value, right? And the second part, the second act, tells that value because they're emotionally able to connect with the story. So I'm going to share with you the second act from this story that I wrote. So it goes like this. I knew deep down what my parents really meant. Why I'm not more like Sarah, who is more focused on her studies. She receives top marks year in, year out, and is about to get a first in her degree. Every visit my parents made to Sarah's home, we'd come back home and I would get told that I have failed in life because I chose not to go to university. That how am I going to get a job? Without a degree, I won't be able to get a job. Without being accepted to university, that I wouldn't even be able to get married because a lot of potential grooms these days sort of potential grooms these days, they often need a degree to be able to get married. So the more and more I heard this, the more and more I believed that I made the wrong decision to cancel my application for university the moment I was able to hit the submit button. I asked myself then, I don't know what I want to become. I don't know how I'm going to spend thousands of pounds worth of my parents' money for a degree that I have no connection with, no value add to me. My dad had a dream of wanting to becoming a doctor, and I knew that I was not going to be able to fulfill this dream. So this is where the conflict is. The conflict arose because I chose not to go to university. The conflict arose because my parents were so proud of Sarah. They thought that she was my inspiration. She is my best friend, but I didn't look up to her to follow in her sort of footsteps. That I cannot get married because I don't have a degree, and a lot of potential grooms didn't need to have degrees in order to get married. It needs to be shown on their CV. And I couldn't make my dad happy to fulfill his dreams. That's where the conflict arose. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to go in life. So this is what the conflict narrative suggests as part of the second act. And many people would often relate to that yes, they don't have a university degree, so the parents deem them a failure, or they're doing something which they're going down a path in life which they don't actually know where it's leading them towards. And a lot of people would be able to say that, yes, if I did my degree, perhaps it could have led me down this path, but I made a choice not to. And these are the struggles and the challenges I'm facing, and these are the consequences that's happening for me not going to university. So that tells the second aspect of the story. And I think what you need to take away from here is that as you tell the first part, you set the tone, you set the setting and the scene. The second part reels the audience in. You hook them in with the story. So this story can be anything, whatever it is you do. It's always about the conflict and the struggle about your story. And then the third act, this is the most important part, in which they actually learn how you overcame this struggle. So when you're telling a story as a storyteller on stage as part of your delivery style, you want to take the audience on a transformation journey, so that they're able to understand the final phase of the storytelling, so that you emphasize exactly how you overcame this conflict and struggle. So where was the lesson? Where was the key takeaway from your message? So let me show you the final aspect of the story. But you know what? For every hour I would be getting an earful from my parents, I would spend the evening locked away painting my frustration and emotions on a canvas. I had a deep passion for art, sketching away, channeling my anger onto my paintbrush. I sparked creativity, imagination, and the use of color. It all told the story itself. It brought a smile to my face. I felt like the painting was speaking to me. The one person who supported my passion and love for art was my friend, Sarah. Her uncle worked for a local art gallery where we'd often go to. Her uncle loved what he saw in my paintings, and that he commissioned my work. And yes, my friend is my inspiration, but not exactly how my parents wanted. But because she understood me and knew what I wanted to achieve, and she was my supporting arm to help me achieve my passion and dream. So you see from that story, that third act, the resolution, my parents were telling me off, right? They were telling me off that I failed, that I didn't go to university, but I channeled that anger and diverted that anger through my paintbrush. I realized that I had a passion for the world of art. So I was able to tell that story, that all this anger and all this frustration, putting it on a canvas, my friend was able to realize that. My friend was able to see and the spark. And the message that comes out from this is that sometimes when you have a vision, an ambition, and you want to do something, it's not always going to be in line with what your parents want you to become. So remember what I said about the overarching message, what it takes to follow your own passion and dream. That's what I want the audience to take away from this message, right? So I learned about my own passion. I discovered my own passion about the world of art and painting because of the issues and conflict and not going to university and all the pain that I was thrown by my parents. And for them comparing me with my friend who's an educationalist genius, who's getting first degrees and so forth, certificates all over her wall. So the message there was that sometimes you need somebody to inject that belief in you. And that's what my friend did. And my parents wanted me to see Sarah as that form of inspiration. She was my inspiration, but not necessarily to study. She was my inspiration because she opened doors for me to believe in who I am, and she had the connections for me to commission my art through her uncle's gallery. You see, and that's how I was able to fulfill my passion and goal. So when you're telling a story, you need to think of it with these three acts. It requires a lot of imagination. It requires a lot of creativity, and it requires you to go back. And this is a fictitious story, by the way. This has no connection with me whatsoever. But it's when you're writing a story, when you're thinking about how you want to tell a story, people love stories. People love because there's an emotional intrinsic connection to that. And as a storyteller on stage telling a story, you're educating people through your own personal life experience or the life experience of somebody else, however it is you're telling the story in first person or in third person. And what you have to do is realize that when you're able to reel people into your story, you're sharing them, you're setting the tone, you're providing the conflict, and then you're providing the knowledge and the education that they can take away. That it's not always about listening to what other people say. That when you have the belief and you have that supporting hand to achieve your goal, your passion, dream, it is possible. And this is how I did it. And so this is when you share the story. So your message, your overarching message could be anything, whatever it is you want to be. But this just sets the tone in terms of the basics of it, the foundations. What a lot of people, professional speakers, love to do is also add anecdotes. They also love to add research. They also like to add facts into their story as well. That connects them to reality as well. That because, for example, for public speaking, if I was to tell the story of how I got into public speaking, I would say that majority of people actually fear public speaking over death. Now, that's a fact. That was a research done in the US. So if I brought that into the speech, then it adds some form of weight to what I'm telling in terms of the story. So when you have a fear, let's go back to when you have a fear of public speaking, make sure that you take away all of these negative connotations or the negative statements that reel in your head, telling you that people are going to judge you, people are going to criticize you, you're going to be misled by the audience, and you don't have the confidence to do that. Because you do. It's all just about discovering that and giving yourself practice. And the second element is that one aspect of delivery is storytelling. That storytelling, to create a story, it requires a bit of work to look into your past, talk to a friend, talk to family members who can unearth stories about you that can relate to a modern day situation. For example, you've got the whole issue surrounding the virus now. Perhaps you fell ill at a certain point in time and that you felt the world was over for you, and then you did the A, B, and C to become this more stronger person that came out. People love to hear that. You probably had an experience that taught you so much about life and you want to share that with the audience, and what is the life lesson you can provide to the audience. So you reel these stories in, you create it, you put it down on paper, and then you see what sort of anecdotes you can put in, what sort of metaphors you can put in to really bring that story to life and make sure there's a need for that story, because you don't want to tell your story to anybody. You want to tell the story to the people who actually who would benefit from hearing such a story. So that's important. And what I think, just the whole idea of public speaking, the whole idea of being on stage, always start with the end in mind. If I didn't come up with this story, it took me 15 minutes, 20 minutes to come up with this story, but I knew the story was focused around passion and following your dreams. Always have the end in mind. Know what the setting and situation is, know what the conflict and struggle is, and then the resolution that you're going to teach. And I think that's one way of actually becoming a great storyteller, a great performer. And when you are a performer on stage, feel free to be moving as much as possible. Do a lot of rehearsals. There are a lot of rehearsal techniques which I'll be sharing with a lot of through the course that I'm creating, which you'll also see on this through this channel as well. To the CoachKamrul Hasan network. It will be made available in the coming months ahead. But all of that is just an opportunity for you to step into the world of public speaking. And I want to really come to the end of the session by saying that if you want more tips, guidance, advice on public speaking, I do have a YouTube channel which does share a lot of this information. In fact, I'll put it on the chat regards to the channel. I send the link, youtube.com/build your confidence on stage. It's on the chat box now, so you can access that. Please do subscribe to that channel. I provide tips on speech preparation. I provide tips on how to manage your time on stage, how to handle criticism if you do get criticism on stage, and various other factors. So the new episodes come out each and every week. So if they have any further questions, I'm open to questions, and I'd like to take that on board, but just make sure it's all a confidence game. It's all a performance. It's all an art. And you have to feel that public speaking is your game to play, because everybody who knows how to communicate needs to communicate. And in the professional world, without communication, you will fall behind in today's society.
Absolutely. Amazing session, I think. Let's just thank everybody to Sabirul Islam, our applause to Sabirul. And of course, we want to have some questions in the next 15 minutes. And what I believe is storytelling is the greatest art in today, how to engage and hook the audience and leave the message, which goes towards the mind and heart. And once we can master the, art a bit, to tell our story. And people often says, it's not showing the story, as Sabir was saying, in the later part of this speech, right? Not just telling it, but just showing the story, so that people understand the meaning and engage within the body language and the display of the things that we can do. And as he suggested, so we are looking forward to have the questions and in the next 15 minutes. So your comments, questions, most welcome. And also let me welcome to a lot of people watching on the Facebook as well. And I'm going to share your channel in the Facebook page as well. So Mr. Sikandar Ajam, who happens to be my ex-boss in Bragg Bank, welcome Ajam Bhai, and also Shataz, Nadira, Parveen, Shumel, everybody watching. So your question time. So who wants to ask question, come ahead and ask it directly from the Zoom session, at the same time from the session from the Facebook. If any question, comments, crafting your stories and public speaking, so anything is most welcome.
So there's a question there's a question asked about how do I research about my audience. So the research that goes on, I think this is asked by Sabrin Biswas. So thank you, Sabrin, for this question. How do I research about my audience? Now, when you know exactly what you want to talk about, there will already be a specific group of individuals who are interested in that sort of specific subject. Like, for instance, if I was to give you an example, I talk about a lot about, in fact, this overarching message that I shared in this story about following your passion and dream, about the world of entrepreneurship. That in itself is a lot of a lot of people want to sort of achieve that in life. And I knew that my immediate audience would be young individuals when I got started in my career. So where can I find young audiences? Schools, colleges, universities, which led to starting up this whole Inspire 1 Million campaign that I did to travel the world, speaking at a lot of schools, colleges, universities, and public events like that. Because I knew that everyone wants to follow their passion. Everyone wants to have everyone has a dream. But how do I get them to realize and recognize that, and who is my audience based on that? So it's a very broad subject, but when you're telling it through a narrative, you're telling it through a story, the audience can be anybody who can buy into that story. And to research that audience, it's about going online. In fact, what I used to do, I used to list every school, every college, every university that is in London, across the UK, and create my own database that way. I would send them an email. I would send them, for instance, a bit of a show reel, 1 minute about my speeches, what I talk about, and send that out to them. If they're interested, they would come back, and then I create a lead, and then that lead gets warm if I start to have a conversation with them. So that's more the sort of business element involved in terms of public speaking, going from public speaking to actually having a profession, becoming a professional speaker, because there's a difference. A public speaker is somebody who does it as a one-off kind of thing every now and then, and whenever they're invited to speak. As a professional speaker like myself, we do that as a lifestyle, as a profession. We earn through public speaking. So it's that. So for me, my audience was always the young generation. That's who I will always stick with. But when it comes to other topics, for example, leadership, when it comes to talking about team building, when it comes to talking about motivating your team, or whether it's about high performing individuals, then I know it's a bit more of a senior audience. So my audiences became corporate organizations or private companies or startups that looking to create a new team. So whenever I deliver a performance, and I look at all the companies that have recently started up, I go online trying to research whether that's the Fortune 500, whether that's the FTSE 100 companies here in the UK, or individual startup companies through groups, organizations, through, for example, even on Facebook groups, there's sort of societies and groupings that have new startups that are created. People talk about them, do a bit of background research, all of that. You're just putting your nose in front, you're just putting your shoe in there, your foot in there, and seeing what how the market sort of responds to that. And if you feel that you are not in that professional level, because I'm sure a lot of you are just starting out in the world of public speaking, so what you want to do is offer yourself in terms of what you do to local groups. There's a lot of, for example, a lot of sessions that you can find on online, for example, Meetup, or even in Eventbrite, things like that, where people are hosting sessions and they're looking for speakers. You see, so these are opportunities for you to knock on their doors. Hey, I'd like to speak at your event because your topic of speech relates to my topic of conversation and what I share with my audience. Can I have a 10-minute spot, a 15-minute spot to speak in front of your audience? And you can do that for free. You do it for free, film your session, you have a bit of a portfolio background, sort of when you're having to promote yourself later on, you have something to show and showcase to your actual audience who are going to pay for your sessions. So you build up that sort of community. Then you can go one level up to startups and local businesses, local groups, to going up to more the corporate organizations, all the way to the bigger sort of platforms like TED, global level platforms that you want to speak in front of. But you need to put your sort of foot in the door. And when you start speaking and there's a group of, let's say, 10, 20 people in the audience, there's going to be somebody who can recommend you. There's going to be somebody who can refer you to another individual who's organizing events. And that's how speakers grow their sort of portfolio. A lot of it is through referrals, and a lot of it is through recommendations, because they've heard you speak and they know what you're going to talk about. So that's how you do the initial research process. And I hope that answers your question.
Sabirul, we got a lot of questions in the through Facebook, a lot of questions. Afsara Adiba, one of them, how can I decrease the first sight nervousness from the audience? I think you have addressed this last session.
Yeah, so both in this section and also in the last session. The last session is available, right, I think, online to have a go through. But again, it's improving your relationship with doubt, because the audience, remember, if you're speaking in front of, let's say, 100 people, right? Even if 3 people in the audience are giving you really horrible looks and saying no, they don't, that impression that they don't agree with whatever it is you're saying, that's 3% of the audience. The remaining 97% of the audience probably are enjoying what you're saying, taken on board. Even if it's one simple thing they take away from your speech, they've taken away something, you see? So it's about perspective. All of it is perspective, and with perspective you change the mindset. And what that means is that when you think of it like that, for every 3 individuals who hate my speech, there's going to be 97 others who love what I talk about, or at least can take away something. So focus on those 97. Focus on those broader audience members who actually can really help you build up that level of confidence. And because public speaking and performing on stage is a performance, it's a form of art, what you need to do is you need to be able to learn to put yourself in a position where you actually, yes, face your fears. Yes, put yourself in that position, because you only build confidence through practice. As much as I can teach you the theory of it all, you build a wall of trust. And I want to share something quickly about the wall of trust. A lot of people listening in right now will have a common thing, which is fear of public speaking, right? You speak in front of your team, you speak in front of your manager or your group of colleagues or your fellow students, whoever they are, them, but they all have different interests, right? If you're coming to a session like this, or even if it's on a practical session at an event where everybody has a common goal, a common interest, which is to improve their presentation skills and overcome fear of public speaking, there's a wall of trust that's been built there, because nobody's going to judge you. Nobody's going to criticize you, because they all have the same concerns. They're all just like you, right? So if you stand up there and talk about your vulnerabilities, that I hate or I'm afraid of public speaking because of X, Y, and Z, nobody's going to judge you. Nobody's going to criticize you, because most likely they all have that same issue too, right? But if you're speaking in front of an audience for the first time, whether it's as I say, in your office or at a university or whatever the setting is, people will criticize you, people will judge you, and you will often be taking that judgment on board more seriously. So I say suggest perhaps even attending or being around a group of people who have that sort of element of fear and actually opening and expressing that, so that you're able to let it out. Once you let it out and you let out that fear in itself, and you're openly willing to express that and agree that yes, you have a fear, you have a clouded judgment, you have something that's forming this sort of form of anxiety within you, you have then you have already taken that first step in acknowledging it. Then you look into how you can sort of face that consequences. And one of the tasks that I do in one of my training sessions is to build that wall of trust is, for instance, somebody's even simple things like somebody standing in front of you and and they can't see you, and taking that leap of faith for them, you're going to be able to catch them when they go behind, when they fall behind. So having that leap of faith, and when you go on stage, you're almost taking that leap of faith, just like that. The audience will catch you. They're not going to judge you. They're not going to criticize you. They're not going to make you feel horrible for who you are, because you have something to tell and you have something they want to learn from you. That's why they're there. So again, perception and perspective. So it all goes down to that. And unless you put yourself in that position, it's really difficult to really take that theory and actually put it into practice unless you're in that position to actually test it for yourself. So simple things like being in front of a camera and filming yourself. When I did my first video shoot on, even at home, making even the YouTube videos, it took me a while, even just for the first episode, which is about 7 or 8 minutes. It took me about an hour and a half just to film, even though I'm a professional speaker, just to get used to filming in front of a camera. But the more and more I did it, the more and easier I got. I can do an 8-minute, 9-minute video shoot within the space of 10 minutes, so just to make 1 or 2 edits here and there. You're not aiming for perfection. What you're aiming for is to feel confident, and what you're aiming for is to be free, flexible. Don't be stiff and rigid. And all of that breaks away. It's one step at a time, breaks away that fear factor that you have inside you. So I hope that answers your questions.
Right, Sabirul, another question. We got a lot of questions, to those who I want to say that we're coming up with the course of public speaking, and after the next week free tester session, another session, third session. So watch out, because we can't answer all of your question tonight, because it's a vast area, and we're going to cover the next session, and then we're going to offer you a series of public speaking sessions based on Sabirul's new book, the Build Your Confidence on a Stage. So watch out, we're going to offer it. Meanwhile, let me take one question, which I really liked it, from Farhan Islam Shihab, that is how to manage awkward silence. Like sometimes we feel blank on stage and don't found words. How can we manage this type of situation?
That's all through practice and rehearsals. Reason being, because I've been on stage and I've been a victim of that myself. Because when you don't prepare well enough, or you don't let a important message land, and then there's awkward silence, either you have it or the audience has. There's two perspectives to that. So why you will have it is because you've probably forgotten what you're going to say next, or your mind is in that position that you're worried of what you're going to say next. You just want to get on with your speech. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is make sure you have a pattern and a flow in terms of how you're speaking. You're speaking, and whenever you're creating this content, even for example with this story that I told, it was phased into 3 parts, right? When you phase your speech into parts, into segments, you're storyboarding, and with storyboarding, you know exactly where you need to be at what point in your presentation, and that allows you to know what's coming next. Why the audience would have a sense of silence is when your message hasn't landed with them. It's because you weren't clear enough, or you probably haven't given enough sort of evidence to sort of back that up. But if that happens, what I would encourage you to do is to move on to the next part of your speech, because what you don't want to do is be held up in that form of awkward silence. I faced it in my early days in public speaking. And in fact, even professional speakers, they might have that off day. It happens. But what you shouldn't do is let your body sort of heat up and go into that fight or flight sort of situation. What you want to do is carry on as normal, move to a different part of the stage, because there's one area of rehearsal which teaches you in terms of where you need to be at what point in time of your speech. And if you haven't done that, if you haven't moved to another part, if you haven't breathed in, inhale, exhale, sort of done that on stage, give yourself that moment to pause. And these small sort of factors allow you to sort of overcome that sort of silence in the audience. And I think silence is often doesn't have to be seen as a negative thing. Silence could mean that people are actually very tuned in. People are actually listening to you very carefully. and taken that information, because you've just probably landed with a very important message, and it takes some time for them to absorb that. So use the element of pause so that you don't let the audience, you don't move on to your next phase, and don't let the audience really take on board what you're saying. And awkward silences happen. Awkward silences are there, and you will experience them. But the more and more you practice beforehand, the more and more you rehearse. And rehearsal techniques are ones which I will be teaching in terms of through the course that I'll be delivering through the Build Your Confidence on Stage course. And so when you do sign up, I'll teach and train you exactly what you need to do in terms of the sort of strategies you need to have to better rehearse before you actually go onto the stage, so you can actually know how to avoid these level of silence, so you're more prepared.
Absolutely. Silence delivers the message, and we often use it for the transition, also message to be understood hard, and also taking it inside for the own consumption. So moving forward, we have a lot of questions, as I was saying, and can I ask everybody who is actually interested to build public speaking muscle inside. I'm asking on the Facebook, they're watching right now, say yes. At the same time, if you can also leave your email address, email ID, we're going to send you the offer exactly. What's we are going to offer in the next couple of weeks and what it looks like, so that you don't miss it. Certainly next week's session is coming up. So please drop your email ID you're watching at this current moment in the website. We will respond to your queries. At the same time, we will send you the offer in the next, when it's available in the very first time from Sabirul. So with this, I want to thank everyone for joining with us tonight, because our time is precious and we wanted to be inside this 45 minutes. I believe that there are a lot of things you have already addressed and you're going to address in the next session, and something already addressed in the first session. So those who has missed it already, I'm going to request all of you, just go back and watch the first episode, which is available at our YouTube and also the Facebook page as well. And Sabirul, if you want to say something for the next episode, what you're going to deliver for the next.
So in the next session, it'll be very much focused on overcoming fear itself, so becoming a bit more in-depth in the next session. And then there's going to be another technique which I'll share also in terms of how we can deliver in a much more potent manner as a public speaker. So there'll be another style in which I'll talk about there. So it's making sure that you harness that growth in public speaking, so you're not just rigid and stick to one element of delivery, but you have the opportunity to deliver various different styles. So yeah.
Absolutely. So we see a lot of yes. Monirujaman, Afsara, Adiba, thank you so much for putting your interest with us. And also, don't forget to share your email ID as well, so that we can share our course detail as we proceed. So with this, we're going to close the session. If anybody wants to say a few words from the Zoom session, what do you see about this program? Who wants to share the experience and comments, the feelings, anything that you have so far, experienced in the last couple of sessions? Who wants to come forward from the Zoom session? It's an open floor for the next couple of minutes, just, expressing your views and ideas, questions, and no more questions, just comments.
Yeah, Sabrin.
Yes, Sabrin, go ahead and express your thoughts.
Thank you, Sabirul Bhaiya, Kamrul Islam Bhaiya, Shobaiki, Kamrul Hasan Bhaiya. Actually, I got some question. Our last session, 6 type of question I have got, and then after the session, I got all my answer, almost 4 of them, and the rest 2 question I get my answer today. So I have no question anymore. And obviously, I'm always thankful to Sabirul Bhai, because we have so much problem when we give presentation or something. Even I have some problem talking in front of all of you.
When you say problem, then there is a problem, right? There will be problem is coming. But replace this word. We can't hear you. Probably you're lost in the because of internet. Moving.
I'd like to say something, Bhaiya, actually.
Okay. Fariha Tazneen Mim. So introduce yourself and introduce yourself first, please.
I'm Fariha Tazneen Mim, and I'm from KCC Women's College, Food and Nutrition. And
Sabrin is one of my classmates.
Okay, go ahead with the comments.
Thank you, both Sabirul Bhaiya and Kamrul Hasan Bhaiya. This session is actually, in one word, it's fantastic. I have already got so many, ideas, or it will solve lots of problems that we actually face whenever we are actually presenting something or during our presentations. Actually, presentation is very important in this phase for us because teachers are, of course, everyone, they will be judging like how we are delivering, and there are students in front of us, they are watching us, our movements, we get nervous, and your process and whatever your procedures you're sharing with us, your experiences, actually it is helping us a lot. It is helping us
Thank
a
you.
lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mim. Thank you so much for your thoughts and this wonderful comment. So I guess that's it for tonight. I'm looking forward to have all of you in the coming session. And of course, we're looking to have all of you in the course in the coming days so that you can get the full benefit out of it and then apply for your life to amplify the opportunities that is available in this world in front of eyes. So thank you, Sabirul, and thank you, everybody. Sabirul, if you want to thanks and just closing remarks.
Thank you very much, everyone. I really do acknowledge and appreciate all the comments that have been made, and I'm glad it's adding value. And you're able to take away something from these sessions. I really hope that the next session you're also able to participate in that, because there will be a bit of a twist to it as well in terms of what you learn. So do participate in that. Yes, there's going to be a lot more happening with the course, and I'd love for you to leave your details so that you can register for the course as well, for us to get in touch with you. But for now, thanks very much to everyone on Zoom and also on Facebook for tuning in, and I will see you all again next week.
Next week, Thursday, 9 p.m. Same time, same place. See you, everybody. Good night.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.